It's Friday night. That can mean only one thing. Yes, it's Weekender Time! And we're giving away a Wardrune Warband. Yes, these are the amazing orcs from Conquest. You've got to check these out. Jerry will tell us more about it during the show. If you want to be in with a chance of winning that, it's dead easy. All you got to do is post a comment below, smash that like button. My children have been training me in this whole YouTube spiel. And finally, hit subscribe and ding my dong, because the weekend has just started now.
Hello, folks. We're back again to bring you all the tabletop gaming goodness that you love. And this week, Warren is joined by myself, Free, and Ben as we take a stroll through gaming news. But before we get in there, we have a few updates. First off, if you're watching this on Friday, then that means you're in prime position to tune in tomorrow when myself and Warren will be throwing waves upon waves of Zulus at the defenders of Rorke's Drift in a little live stream.
Yes.
So this will be going out on the Twitchies, the YouTubes, and I believe our homepage as well. So 3 ways to watch. And you can even talk to us. And sometimes I'll even remember to look at the screen and read what you're saying.
I'm super excited about this. I am really looking forward to this. To play Rorke's Drift on an anniversary of like Rorke's Drift. Like, how often does that happen, Jerry? Apart from obviously the couple of 100 years where it did happen. Yeah. But this is our opportunity.
This is our opportunity
to take advantage and to do this. I am looking forward to it.
I bought myself a new laminator. That's how much I'm looking forward to it.
Well,
you're getting more technologically able, Jerry. Look at you with a laminator.
There's our timetable for what happened on the day.
I'm going to be
each one of those is a game turn. And then on that side, that actually tells people how to play rather than look at me going, what am I doing with these? They can then just turn it over and go, I'm going to charge. Go, okay, do that.
You do realize, Jerry, that I am still going to be looking at you going, what do I do with these?
Yeah. Unfortunately, young Shay has come down with some form of the lurgy and will not be joining us. So it looks like you will be up against me defending. Da, da, da.
Do you know what, Jerry? Me and you have got this.
Oh, very much so.
Tonight, whenever this show ends, okay, I'm going to have an early night. I'm going to scuffle off the bed.
Good plan.
Probably take some whiskey with me, but I'm going to scuffle off the bed and I'm going to stick on my Rorke's Drift audio book.
Ooh.
Because by tomorrow,
the book by? Do you know?
Yes, an author. Believe it or not.
Gunny Zulu.
Do you know what? I shall look it up. If I could spell Rorke's Drift.
Because I've been rereading Zulu by Saul David recently, but that's about the whole Zulu War. Although there is a chapter somewhere slap bang in the middle about the drift, but it is really only just a chapter.
Yeah.
Focus in on it.
There's a couple on Audible. Okay. I'm not sure which one it is. It might be the Crucible of Honor. Okay. Which is the Battle of Rorke's Drift, and it's an Anglo-Zulu War book 2, and it's by a chap called James Mace and narrated by Jonathan Waters. Or it could be Adrian Greaves' Rorke's Drift, which is narrated by Paul Hertzberg. Now, the interesting thing is the version that I'm listening to is very interesting because it's done from the perspective of it's historically accurate, but he actually fills in the dialogue that he would have expected to have happened. So it's very realistic. It's very gritty, and yeah, it's it's really, really good. Actually, it is really good. So I'll be listening to that. And I will be coming in full Zulu mode.
I thought you were going to say full Zulu dress there.
So did I.
We were all waiting for it.
I shall hunt out my gourd, and if I can't find it, there's a lovely looking carrot up the stairs. I shall get my whittling knife out, and it will be ready, and I will be there, Jerry, in all my glory, to bring the Zulus down upon you. I have an interesting one for you, actually. Last night I was listening to an audiobook, and it was an audiobook about a submarine, a Russian submarine that either disappeared or defected. I didn't get that far. I fell asleep during the Cold War. But the best thing about it was when I fell asleep, I dropped into that world in my dream.
Oh, that's fantastic.
So I spent the whole night basically in a world of Cold War espionage and submarines. And it was really, really interesting. It was really interesting. It was like a real kind of Bond meets Connery.
Yeah. I was going to say,
it was great.
Did you have difficulty understanding the captain with such a thick Glaswegian accent?
Well, it was interesting because I was on the Americans' side, right? I've been really embracing America recently.
America.
I am just so America. It's all Stevie Ray Vaughan's fault. He's got me completely in the mood for America, and I'm just all America at the moment. And you want to know something which was totally awesome? The captain of my U-boat, well, it wasn't a U-boat, they're Germans, submarine. The captain of my submarine was the dude from Breaking Bad who was also in The Mandalorian.
Oh,
Fring. Gustav Fring.
From,
yes. I should remember Gustav Fring's real life world name, but I don't. So I'm just going to call him Gustav. But he wasn't called Gustav on the submarine. Can you guess what he was called, Ben?
Johnny Submarine.
Come on, Ben. You can do it. Can you guess what he was called?
Captain.
You got it. His name was Captain. Right. So that's the end of my story.
Giancarlo Esposito for people playing at home.
Yeah, so if you're interested in your Rorke's Drift, me and Jerry are going to have the time of our lives.
Very much so. We'll enjoy ourselves. We don't care what happens to you at home.
1 p.m. GMT.
GMTs? What?
Hey,
historically accurate, that one.
G&T and Tiffins, man. We'll be on our way.
All about that. Also, in keeping with me, because apparently I'm the most important person, I've been sitting down with Leo from Parabellum, and we've been doing a new Path of Conquest for the Wadrun, the lovely Saurian lizardmen, orcish people for Conquest and the world of EA. Possibly not how that's pronounced, but it's how I'm pronouncing it. If you've been interested in Conquest, we've already done the initial 4 factions. And this time round, we add in the new milestones from 1 to 6 so that you can build your Wadrun all the way to the end to have a fully fighting force, a fully armed and operational Saurian battle station, or in this case, a massive apex predator that I can set on people.
So this is another track in our Slow Grow League then, yes. Jerry, yeah?
Yep.
So in the original Slow Grow League, we had 4 tracks for the 4 other factions. You could kind of hop in, choose your faction, and then join along for suggested builds and suggested tactics and stuff for those builds. Mm-hmm. So this is now added a 5th track. I like that idea. I really do like that idea. And if you haven't been into Conquest, go and check it out. I'm going to do a massive plug for the OTT store because you can get it on the OTT store. We're getting an upgrade. We're getting a big old upgrade. So all of the really kind of smart minds and stuff behind the scenes have been working on an upgrade to the store. So it'll be rolling out very shortly. And apparently that upgrade will allow me to fire out vouchers. Yeah, so I can come on this show and just start saying, "Here, let's get some vouchers." And it means I'll be able to get stuck back into the store, because the whole idea of the OTT store is for it to have the coolest, most weird and wonderful hobby stuff that you could ever find, and a curated selection of some of our favorite games and miniatures. So it's not all encompassing, but it has what we think is cool, and then a mountain of the weird and wonderful and really cool kind of hobby stuff. So you can take what we think is cool and make it even cooler than we ever thought that it could be in the first place.
There's practically everything from Green Stuff World on there. So
yes.
Everything is cool.
I am so hooked. So that is basically my mission in life now, is to find all of the weird and the wonderful and bring it all together into one kind of Willy Wonka of the wargaming world, where I can get my stick and do somersaults and stuff like that there. And then point to cool rolling pin.
I was going to say, we kill one child off for every range we add. Yes, it's just the way it works.
I will say, going back to the Conquest thing, if you're interested in picking up some stuff in there, we actually have bundles dedicated to the different paths of Conquest. So
yes, that's right.
If you wanted to check out the ones from the 100 Kingdoms or the Spires or whatever, each of those is then labeled on the OTT store. So you can be like, oh, I just want to get all of the miniatures that Jerry used or Justin used or something. You can just go and grab that if you want to follow along, which is pretty cool. So hopefully we'll do something similar for the Wadroon as well when we get to
I mean, who does not want a giant T-Rex?
Oh, yeah, exactly. Yeah. Dinosaurs are always cool. So
I mean, I don't know why you wouldn't want to start with a Wadroon.
Yeah.
Yes, but this is not just any T-Rex. This is one that you can ride on.
That is true. There are 3 flavors of them, which you'll find out, I think, I want to say it doesn't get added till about week 5. So you have to stall your guns on that one to find out exactly how good it is.
Is it a case, though, Jerry, that whenever you open the box that has that horrifying T-Rex in it, the first human that it sees, it bonds to, and it creates a human T-Rex kind of a bond.
That is very true.
Yeah.
He's put his imprints on you, Jerry. Yeah.
Look at it. Look at it. There's 2 of them, and they're ready to attack. Jerry's got a couple of T-Rexes on the end of his digits, and he's not afraid to use them.
I'll go one step further. A little bit spoilery, but not much.
Yeah.
Leo, when we're talking about how he's building my force, because the Wadroon work differently to a lot of the other forces, they kind of build, like the Zulus, they've got a very African tribal feel to them. As they fight, they build chants up, and then the chants can be used for other units to inspire them in different ways. So we're going through all of that, and he's explaining how this works for the Bloodied and the Braves and all the rest. And then we get to the Apex Predator, and Leo goes, "I've built a list with 3 in mine." You're going, "You have what?" Yeah, I'm not getting 3, am I? No, you're not getting 3, but I've built a list for 3. Fair enough. Yeah.
Of course he did. Of course he did. It's absolutely the way to go. I feel sorry for the T-Rex, Free.
Why?
Because in the grand scheme of deep time and the world and evolution, if you think about it, right, you could go back and you could pick out a shrew, and you could show the shrew, look what you became. You became a Free. Or a Ben. Look how amazing evolution treated you. You could pick a monkey or some kind of ape, and you could bring them forward, and they'd be impressed by what they saw. You get a T-Rex, you bring him here, you show him a chicken.
Very true.
A dumb animal. A dumb animal that doesn't even really need a brain, Free. You could cut its head off and it'll still chuckle around, and you could stick bits of corn down its neck and it'll survive for a little while. But imagine being a T-Rex. You are the master of your world. And that's what evolution did to you. It turned you into a chicken.
But we all have these ideas that T-Rex was master. Somebody pointed out to me the other day, they've got massive legs, a huge tail, and very short front arms. What if they hopped around like kangaroos?
That would be amazing.
Potentially. I heard those little arms could potentially be wings as well because they've got the same structure on the ends as ostriches.
If it flapped, it would sound like a bee because it would be tiny. It would be
Shall we?
It's time. Oh, go on, Jerry. Can I do it? Or do you want to do your sultry tones?
No. You go ahead. Let me just turn my volume down.
Okay, everybody, just prepare yourselves here now. We're getting ready. It's time. It's the most important part of the show. It's the bit that we all love. It's the bit that thousands of you congregate around us every single week to see. It is, of course... There we go.
Oh, you've now got to beat that next week. That's going to be...
Yeah!
You just bring in a foghorn.
Yeah.
Do you know, like, I've got to big him up. I've got to big him up. You know, we have a responsibility as a community to reinforce where the innovation comes from. There's no innovation whenever you're already at the top and you're churning out more and more of the same, because what you end up is on a treadmill, and you end up on that treadmill churning stuff out to please the same tastes over and over again. That's perfectly fine. That's part and parcel of it. But the treadmill breaks and then it all comes crumbling down. But it's all the other little tiny treadmills that are churning out the innovations, trying to find new things, trying to find new ways, trying to explore new avenues. And that is what an Indie of the Week is all about, that exploration of the new, of the weird, of the something different.
And the something different this week
What do you got?
is Black Hussar, which is all the goodness of hussars, but in a delightful sable color.
Ooh.
So this is a German company who do French, Indian War, 7 Years' War. Let's face it, they're practically the same thing. And Napoleonics. And I first became aware of this when a friend of mine sold off his Napoleonic range to them several years ago because he was going to focus on fantasy with Westphalia. So you tend to get bits and pieces that are, I would say, less usual. There will still be British and French in there, but when you look at the 7 Years' War stuff and the Napoleonics, they sort of skirt around the edges a bit more, and you see things that you wouldn't ordinarily come across. So the French and Indian War has a bit of an overlap with the 7 Years' War in that it was practically the same. It started 2 years earlier than the 7 Year War did in Europe. So you've got a lot of these figures will work for both. But they're delightful. I don't know who did all of the sculpting. I think Paul Hicks did some of it.
He does tend to have his hand in pretty much everything.
He does. He does do that. But we do get to see some very nice figures for that period. So it's one of those ones that sort of gets overshadowed by the likes of the American War of Independence and the...
because I just want to double check this. Now, the French and Indian War took place on the continent of America, yes?
Yes, it started... French Indian War was all about the battle between England, France, and Spain to a certain extent as well.
Yes.
In the 1750s. About 2 years into the French Indian War, it spilled over into Europe as well. So the 7 Years' War started in Europe with the same powers sort of aligned at the same way.
Is this during that kind of golden age of piracy kind of era?
I can't remember what the golden age of piracy is defined as. This would be 1750s to 1760s. I know obviously there was an awful lot of naval battles involved with both, especially in and around the Caribbean. So it's entirely possible that would be.
Okay, so the common designation, right? It's just after the common designation for the period between 1650s and the 1730s is the kind of like the golden age of piracy that took place in around the Caribbean and whatnot. I suppose I was asking because I sometimes get confused on the timeline because there's been a number of wars, hasn't there, between the French and the English and the Spanish and
one or two. Yeah.
So this is taking place a little bit later. So piracy's not well, it's obviously still exists, but it's not such a big romantic thing at this point. This is Last of the Mohicans kind of.
Yes. Oh yeah. This is
period.
very much that.
This is big woods and mountains, snow, people battling in small squads and fighting over wet, damp log cabins and things like that.
I really love the armed civilian skirmishers are really beautiful.
They're very nice.
Yeah.
They appear a couple of times because they are generic. You know, they could be used for the British. They could be used for.
They've all got very dashing hair. Oh, very nice.
Oh yeah,
Fabulous.
Windswept and interesting.
Yeah.
I think is the phrase. You can see the civilian sets just in there again. I think that's one we haven't seen yet, and the ossifers and leaders for the English. So the Hujum-Columns. The French and Indian Wars part is relatively small in comparison to the actual 7 Years' War.
Gorgeous sculpts. Look at the beauty of the fabrics in them sculpts.
I also like, and presumably this was done because they're a mixture of bees putty and green stuff, I think. So there'd be various colours on these are all the greens before they've been
black and white.
They're just black and white. So it removes that and you can just see them in their finery, I suppose, which is an interesting way of doing it. Quite like them as well. The prim and proper English ossifers.
Mm-hmm.
But
they've even got the facial expression correct, haven't they?
Yeah. Where's my tea, damn it?
Yes.
a swagger stick up his backside. That's yeah, it's one way of doing it. So like I say, the French and Indian War is probably the smaller of the sections on the site. The 7 Years' War takes that and expands upon it a bit.
Now, the 7 Years' War is like World War Zero, isn't it? It's effectively like a world war.
Yeah. So if you see you can actually see the dates there. So 1754 to 1763, the French and Indian Wars. 2 years later, 1756 to 1763, the French, or the 7 Years' War.
Yeah.
So they both end at the same point when people become sort of bankrupted from all of this.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of it kicked off because I think it was the Austrian succession. There'd been a war for Austrian succession in the 40s that had floundered and hadn't really been resolved. So when people started to get uppity again, this was a chance to sort of reignite old wounds and finish off these battles that hadn't been finished. I'd also say this is really cute and probably means nothing to anybody, but those are the designations for infantry and cavalry and the like that you would see on military maps.
That's cool.
which I just has absolutely no bearing on anything, but I really like it.
Yeah.
You learn as you prize, man. You can learn as you prize.
So having a look at people like
Friedrich,
our Flugel Lieutenant,
Flagellant.
It seems like the Prussians are the force that they specifically honed in on for this one. Then, yeah.
Oh yeah, because there are a lot of companies out there will obviously spend a lot of time doing the English or British and French.
Yeah.
So the smaller people who would get involved get sort of sidelined, I suppose, to a certain extent.
See, there's a Willy Wonka stick right there.
Oh, very much so.
Yeah.
I'll get me one of them.
Are they all predominantly resin, Jerry, or is there a bit of metal
these are all metal castings.
I
think actually predominantly metal. Occasionally you'll have a few resin bits and pieces with the terrain and stuff you'll see later on. But they do these, and these I think are some of my favorite pieces in here, which are little diorama, little vignette scenes, so enlistment scene where you've got peasants coming to sign up, being told to make their mark. There's a baker as well somewhere with a set of scales baking the camp bread, and nice for a little vignette or diorama, or to actually make a camp if you're playing out games and you want to have the camp in the background. You can do this thing.
Yeah, because we get all caught up in the formations and stuff like that there. When you think about it, isn't it nice to add just a little bit of decorative flair in terms of little mini dioramas that you just set around, just to add a little bit of life and breathing to your battles.
It's why I like artillery crews. I think, like, so often you see people just put cannons or big guns on the table. I love it when someone actually takes the effort to put the crews around it, builds it on a slightly bigger scenic base and all that kind of thing, builds all the miniatures into it so it looks like a moment in history, because I think it adds a little bit of sort of like flair to the back of your army, especially since they're going to be basically sitting still for most of it.
You can really see it in here in the train section where you have, well, there's the baker at work, camp followers, carrying the
field oven.
It's the field oven, so you can.
That's cool.
You can have all the kit and caboodle. I mean, they're at a big trough, kneading the dough en masse for what they would.
Almost sawdust in there.
Bulk it out. People need grit and fibre.
Yeah.
And of
Very
course,
cool.
some camp followers. Because you always need some ladies on hand to help with cooking.
Picking up the dead.
Picking up the dead, pulling the teeth, whatever it happens to be. Have a look at the cuirassier and dragoons as well. I'm having flashbacks. I used to paint this period of British redcoats, but for 54mm for the Irish Toy Soldier Museum in Belfast. So I spend a lot of time doing colour parties and the like. And if you think Napoleonic uniform is tricky.
So one thing I've always wondered, right? So dragoons appear across every faction, effectively. What makes a dragoon? Is it their particular armaments and their style of fighting? Or
it was essentially a cavalry regiment who they initially fought as mounted infantry.
Right, yeah.
So they would use the horses to get where they needed to go, and then 1 in 3 would dismount and take the other 2 horses to the rear while the rest fought as either a line unit or a skirmisher. By the time you hit Napoleonics, they've changed. They mostly fought in the saddle, but initially dragoons were sort of mounted infantry. But you'll often see certain things like the Hussars appear in multiple places as well, and they started off as a national force, and then just sort of people copied them for being fancy light cavalry with all the trimmings, because people like that.
It does make me wonder about fighting from the saddle. Like, is it all things being equal, if you have a really good on foot fighter and a really good in the saddle fighter, does the saddle fighter have the Obi-Wan advantage of the high ground, or does he have the disadvantage of an animal between his legs?
It's not stable,
Well, as we know from...
Which is a disadvantage Ben knows all about. Mr. Furious, eh?
I think it was Richard Sharp summed it up when he said, if somebody's coming at you on a horse, then just take the butt of your gun and hit the bugger out of the horse's mouth, and I guarantee it'll throw the rider. Yeah,
so, but this is what I'm wondering. It's like what? And do you know what, viewers? If you have any insight in this, please comment below, because I am curious as to, was there after the charge? I can understand the charge of a horse, right? So horses charging in could be devastating, right? Because it did run right over you. The horse could kill you, for goodness sake.
Yeah.
But when you get to that stage, is fighting off the back of a horse actually an advantage? Or would you be better just getting the hell out of town and coming, reforming and charging in again?
If it's anything like my time playing Medieval Total War, which makes me an amazing historian, it's that you shouldn't ever leave your cavalry fighting in combat. You should charge them in and then go away and come back again. Yeah. Because you are effectively just a massive target at that point. And even if, you're sitting in the middle of a formation thinking, oh, I'm safe, I'm just killing all the people around me, there's an archer 10 meters above you on a hill going, oh, there's a guy standing above my troops, I'll shoot him. So, it's definitely one of those things where I think you have to do the hit and run thing, I think, to make it work. But,
it's interesting, because it's something that I would love to see if it's modeled within the rules of war games, where the longer a horse and rider in combat, the more penalized they are in terms of their skills or attacks, a lot of vulnerability.
A lot of historic games will have two melee attributes essentially for things, generally called something like clash and sustain, or
Yeah.
and cavalry will have a very good clash. They go in hard, and then their sustain drops right off. So once they've been in combat a turn, they become less effective.
Become really vulnerable. Yeah.
Other things like infantry might have the similar value for clash and sustain. They're always as effective, even after the charge. So it is modeled in certain games. The fact that horses won't charge things like pikes,
Correct,
which then became bayonet on rifles and squares, is a massive detriment. So you get that thing where dragoons didn't fight on horseback because they knew they wouldn't get the cavalry to actually charge in, so they would dismount and then fight. Then that led to the development of things like carabines, so the smaller rifles, because they couldn't carry a big full-on musket. So so it changed the armament they had. But then over time, then how the dragoons fought, they stayed in the saddle, and they because they had the smaller weapons, they could fire from horseback and sort of fire and retreat. And you get, every time something happens in warfare that changes how a unit is used, then there's normally a counter to it, and then that changes again how they use. So
yeah, because I'm thinking, Jerry, right, that if you took, say, the red coats from Battle of Waterloo, and you put them up against Mongols, I think the Mongols could probably hold their own. Because, the rifles and stuff like that, yes, they are potent. They have a longer range. But the Mongols, for example, wouldn't be doing a charge in the same way as, for example, the French, where you could form a square and deter the horses from the actual charge. The Mongols would encircle you, and they fire. They're firing fairly hefty bows from the back of the horses. So I do wonder if as we progress through the technological upgrades, if you suddenly got to a point and said, well, actually, do you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go 500 years earlier and pick these guys out, drop them into the battle, and then suddenly the technological upgrades are kind of nerfed a little bit, So I don't know. It's an interesting what if, at least for me, anyway.
It comes down then to, I suppose, tactical doctrine. That obviously the Mongols fire and fled, whereas the Redcoats would potentially be more disciplined if they could hold the firing line. A lot of times people try to chase Mongols, and when you start chasing them, then you get strung out, and then they can be picked off. And so it's
I was going to say, I've read the title Camel Cannon, and I'm now very upset that there's no image.
There is no image. And weirdly, I know there is an image out there because I've seen that camel cannon. It is a swivel gun like you would have that could be mounted on the deck of a small sloop on the back of a camel.
That's
they
awesome.
would then they could camel across the desert and then swivel around, name it at people.
Utterly gutted.
Yeah.
Because I was convinced, as soon as there was no image for it, the image drew itself in my head. And it was a camel with its front legs down and the back end reared up, ready to take aim.
like a Chinese barking dog, but
that's exactly it. Yeah. But it fired dates.
There's a prime example of a version.
I had a
you see, if that camel raised the back legs, you could get proper trajectory then.
Very soon you could. But yeah, so this was one of the big ranges that I think went from Westphalia.
Wow.
Kind of fills in the gaps of Napoleonic history that you don't normally see. Yeah.
Send people into Afghanistan and watch them all die. That's generally.
Do you want to know something interesting?
Go on.
In many ways, Jerry, my little hypothesis there of Mongols versus the Brits, versus the Brits, we're going to be doing tomorrow.
Yeah, not a million miles away from it.
Yeah,
I think I was.
Well, it's just I don't have any horses from a Zulus.
That is true,
and they're not Mongols. But aside from them not being Mongols and them not having horses, it's there. It's there on the map.
The precursor would be closer. The precursor, the Battle of Isandlwana, where the full Zulu force ruffle stomped over the British. Showed. I have a sneaking suspicion it's often referenced as the last time a native army beat a colonial European army with better technology. I think there may have been a few other battles during the Zulu War where it was closer. Maybe there was a bit of sway back and forth, but that was the last time a native army did that. But I think these are absolutely gorgeous. The Persians and Kurdish.
Gary, what's the correct term for that hat?
Which one?
The Persian hat that was just on.
I've no idea. The big tall bearskin looking thing. It may just be another type of fez. I'm sure somebody will tell us because they often have specific names like miters or shakos or whatever. But it's an impressive looking affair. On their
to
head.
save to save you all from it, I just typed in "big hairy fez."
Yes.
Is it called?
And I shit you not, I've got a big screen completely white that says results for big hairy fez are hidden by safe search.
Give me 1 second. 1 second. Just pause for a sec.
Has he got a big hairy fez?
You've offended him.
Is he a way to get one? Welcome back, Ben.
Oh, yes, sorry.
We thought I'd frightened you off there with my big hairy fez. If anybody can get Google to actually return a result for what a big hairy fez is, we'd be very interested to hear that down in the comments. So,
yes. But there's a couple of other things I want to show before we leave the world of Black Hussar behind.
Yes.
Because obviously I'm having a lot of fun just going through the more esoteric parts of the Napoleonic conflict here.
Jerry's.
But the reason I knew Westphalia did a Napoleonic range, and then the reason I knew that they'd been transferred to Black Hussar was because of some of the figures from the United Kingdom range, which I think you will appreciate massively, Warren. So if I open up the British, and then I would very much like to see our rude Brits and rude Highlanders.
Oh, yes!
They're great.
These are awesome.
So there's a couple of could be Brit, could be Irish. You could change up the facings and the shackle badges and stuff and have them be whatever force you want to be. But the rude Highlanders are right up Main Street. Oh, there we go. One back. No, I'm just saying for people playing Silver Bayonet, if you want to add a little bit more interest and personality to your British faction, then what better way to show a bunch of goblins or some vampires exactly what you think of them than with a bunch of...
It is why those soldiers were taken out of the army and given into the hunters.
Yeah, they have no fear at all. Yeah. No fear. The rest of the British line was relatively small, but they did have, again, a couple of interesting little pieces like the staff officer. They do a separate coach, so you just got him with his orders and a British surgeon.
Oh, that's great. I love those. Yeah.
A barber surgeon and a horse.
They're just so expressive, aren't they? Oh, I love this range. I absolutely love this range.
There's an
interesting point. Yeah.
There's your Willy Wonka hat. You could just build Willy Wonka with this range. You really can.
But Jerry, you don't need to do something as big as Waterloo. Silver Bayonet, and some of the skirmish games really open up some of this to you.
With your wounded soldiers, or perhaps if you're playing something like Silver Bayonet, you may be chasing the post coach, the mail coach, across the board. You just have it going ahead and you're trying to either ambush it or interrupt it or catch up on it while it's being pursued by whatever it happens to be pursued by. Maybe it's filled with a holy relic. You need it to off some people. But yeah, it's a stunning range, relatively compact and bijou, and I suppose niche to both the 7 Years' War and the Napoleonics, but with a lot of flavour in there that sort of opens up both of them massively. So
yeah,
I am definitely going to dig through that site from a skirmish perspective to explore the that whole silver bayonet kind of undead, weird kind of Napoleonic thing. Because it would be a great way to sate your... Like loads of us have a look at the Napoleonics, right? And a lot of us, you kind of end up with an ambivalence. You really want to have some of them, but Napoleonics kind of lends itself to everything being rank and file, and then you think to yourself, oh, no way. I couldn't get into that because it will take me the rest of my life to get anywhere with it. But games like Silver Bayonet have now opened up the possibility for you to say, well, actually, I'll get just a few fun bits. And then you can go really in on the characters. I want them Scotsmen. I think them Scotsmen are devils on the battlefield.
I was going to say, we're going to see you picking up some of those Brits, and we're going to have the Silver Bayonet, the crack of doom.
You're just amusing yourself now, Ben, aren't you?
Oh, yeah. It's brilliant.
Silver Bayonet, crack of doom. Love it, man. This is it. Sold. And that, kids, is why we do Indie of the Week. It's time for some news. Coming to you from the center of Northwestern Europe. Covering board games, war games, card games, and all that you love. It's the news.
Back with some news. We're going to be diving into something just quickly to start things off, because Osprey Games this week announced that they are going to be adding another game to their awesome Undaunted series. Oh my God, I love Undaunted. It's so good. But they're going to be bringing us to Stalingrad later this year. So they're going to be doing a new boxed expansion for the game, also completely standalone, just like North Africa was, that will allow you to play as either the Russians, the Soviets, or the Germans in the fight for Stalingrad. So proper sort of enemy at the gates style affairs. They said there's going to be a whole new brand new sort of like narrative campaign built into this. That's going to go over 15 different scenarios. All of them are going to actually sort of link into each other. So they're kind of building on a little bit of the narrative stuff that they built into North Africa in that respect, where you're going to be able to sort of like tell a story and sort of weave a narrative through them all. That doesn't mean that there's any kind of legacy mechanics or anything in there. It's all going to be sort of like just if X wins, then this happens, or if you don't achieve this objective, that will flow into this kind of thing. But yes, looks very, very cool. As I've talked about previously, I think about Undaunted, I think it's very much an awesome World War II miniatures game without the miniatures. It's really, really fun, very good mechanics, really nicely sort of illustrated by amazing artists. And they've really done like a lot with a small box of stuff. If you've not checked it out before, we have a Let's Play of North Africa with Free and Jerry actually playing the game, which is pretty cool. We should have some more stuff in the future coming up for it as well. But oh my God, this is going to be very cool. Yeah.
There's a 4-player game has just been filmed with John, Justin, Shay, and myself in Normandy, having a look at the Reinforcements 4-player rules, which is a really interesting addition. Every time they've iterated it, they've, tweaked it slightly. So North Africa, the vehicle rules in that were very different from Normandy because it was a different sphere in that theatre.
So you're telling me that John got really excited about tanks in Normandy then?
John did get very into tanks in Normandy. I didn't know if John would like it because John can be very fussy, especially when it's something World War II based. If it doesn't actually feel like World War II to him, if it's too much of a pastiche or whatever, but he was actually very much on board for it. And then immediately went, I wonder if I could replace all the miniatures with or the little discs with micro machines and stuff. But,
good.
The branching campaign sounds fascinating.
Yeah, I think it'd be really fun. It's some really good stuff, as I say, coming out from Osprey this year, and Undaunted's an awesome one to go for. If you do get the reinforcements pack, by the way, it comes with like neat stuff in it, so you can pack everything into it, which is pretty awesome. So that's a pretty good reason to buy all 3 of them, I guess. But
so on a scale of 1 to 10 for our viewers, right?
Yes.
And I'm going to bundle everybody together, whether they are war gamers, board gamers, card gamers, or whatever. So take into the case the median line there. On a scale of 1 to 10, how likely are you to recommend that they try a game of Undaunted?
I would say 8 out of 10 that they should try it.
Nice.
It's got really good card play in it.
Yes.
It's got very good sort of board gamey style mechanics in there.
Mhm.
The dice that's in there sort of throws a random sort of element of randomness into the mix, which means that it's down to skill and placement of troops, but also the luck of the dice. And then it also sort of fulfills that kind of moving chits or miniatures around on a board scape or on terrain, effectively fighting for control of things and fighting over for objectives.
So I suppose my second question then is for our wargaming community, is it a good break from wargaming to have something just simpler, very small, self-contained as a board game?
I would say so as well. Yeah, I'd say
For our board gaming community, is it a decent introduction for steps on the way to wargaming?
I mean, Free played it, and she'd not done much. I assume you've probably not done any World War II wargaming at all.
No, not really.
So this was quite nice for you.
This was a really nice change for me because it's had all the usual board game mechanics, but into a completely different setting that I normally wouldn't touch. And I had such fun playing it, even though I did get a bit bad by Jerry, but I had fun.
He's evil.
I'm cute and cuddly. No, but it sits between those three. I mean, the whole idea is it's a deck building, drafting game that also happens to be a World War II war game, and every scenario is a specific, part of a campaign in a theater. So you can follow the troops through Normandy or the long range desert group in North Africa as they do their hit and run tactics, and presumably Stalingrad will be something similar around there. So you get a very good overview of a theater and a style of warfare if you're interested in the military aspect. And then the board game, it does come down to, a troop movement and placement game on the tabletop. So how you deploy your troops and how you move them. The fact that there is a scouting mechanic in the game, you cannot push troops forward if you haven't scouted the area first. So it brings all three of those together very nicely. I'm not a huge card game fan. It wouldn't be something I've massively dabbled into, but I really enjoy the draft mechanics and how they make a feature of the game, because it's both your scouting, your fog of war, the friction, stamina, the health as well of the troops. So if you don't have the cards in your hand when a unit on the table gets destroyed, then the counter gets removed. But then you can bring more reinforcements back in through the drafting later on, but they have to come back from where your forces were starting from. All of this sort of lends itself part and parcel to it. Mm-hmm. So I would go so far as say I would go 10 out of 10, regardless of what way you're coming at the hobby from. It's a really cheap introduction to all three of those type of games, games, board games and card games, and will sit happily on your shelf. And with reinforcements, the fact that it opened up from a 2-player to a solo and 4-player game means you can quite happily replay over and over again in any way, shape or form you want, and see how it plays out.
Happy days. What's next?
So next up, we're going to the realms of fantasy, and this is looking at Freebooter miniatures and their very awesome game that has always sort of like chugged along in the background, or sailed along in the background, I guess you'd say, of wargaming for the past sort of, I guess you'd say, decade maybe.
Oh, easy.
It's been at Salute since we've started going to it, I think was the main thing. But it should be noted that the rules are now free for you to download in both English and German. So if you want to head on over and get your hands on the rules, a whole bunch of scenarios, lots of the little sort of like magazines that they do as well, all that's being sort of worked into the mix so that everyone can dive in and give this game a go for free. This also came alongside the latest releases for January as well. So you got a whole bunch of stuff for the different crews. You had the Wailing Woman that you saw at the top. You've got Sophia, the Herrer, Le Lut, and then Modit and Asquereros Fuegos.
Sure. I'm just going to call him Travis Bickle. He's one step away from tracking down Jodie Foster.
Yeah, the other one has a striking resemblance to my mother-in-law.
Well, maybe they're part of pirate crews. Who knows? But,
and that's not me digging through a 1970s joke. I'm being genuine there. So,
but this range has been around for a while, and it always provides these really evocative and interesting and different miniatures. The kind of theme of Freebooter's fate has always been sort of like fantasy pirates,
Mm.
but they've always tried something a little bit different and sort of played around with it a little bit more. Like you have little goblin crews and everything running around in the swamps. You have these slightly more sort of more fantasy than piratical sort of elements thrown into it as well, with all the members of the different cults and all that kind of thing at the same time. They even do sort of little spin-off games as well, like this little game where you play sort of football but with cannonballs, which is pretty awesome.
Nice.
So, like, if you've not heard of Freebooter's Fate before, this is a perfectly good opportunity to dive in and give it a go and see what you think of it. It's very, very good. It's been around for a very long time. It's a little bit like GCT. Oh, there you go. Gary's showing off on it.
If you're unaware of the spiritual leader of the cult of games, Sean Connery, this is a Freebooter's Fate model based on Highlander, the peacock cloak wearing Ramirez. So, there's a wealth of miniatures in there from, and I think they're all sculpted by Werner Klock. I don't think.
I think so. Some of the more recent ones have been sculpted by a different selection. But
all you have to know is if you haven't checked out Werner's work, Werner is a legend in our industry, an absolute legend. So go and check him out.
Yeah, so for example, like most of it is, but there's also, I think it's Justina Bien has done them, and Israel Delgado Laborda has also done them. Oh, I did much better with that name.
You did well with that
one.
There
we go.
Oh, Ben,
yes.
I for a moment there, I felt like Jamie Lee Curtis. I just wanted to wrap myself around. Go on, keep with the voice.
Whisper in my ear.
But yeah, make sure to go and check it out. It's one of those really awesome sort of like underground games, a little bit like sort of Bushido and that kind of thing that you definitely want to go and have a look at. It's very cool. But,
Nice. Who's taking us next?
Hey, and the TARDIS is broken, guys. So,
oh no,
the TARDIS is broken. There's a brand new Doctor Who title making way to the tabletops this year. So, following on from the previous Doctor Who release at Gale Force 9, we had Time of the Daleks. We're going to be going with the 11th Doctor and companions in a new adventure, escaping from the Weeping Angels with Doctor Who. Don't blink. So, making your way through a storyline in hopes to collect missing items to fix the TARDIS. 2 to 5 players are going to head to an abandoned spaceship in an attempt to fix their escape route before they come prey to the Weeping Angels, okay? So there are a good selection of characters to choose from when you start. So you've got the 11th Doctor, you've got Amy, Rora, that was Rory and Clara together. So you get Rory or Clara. But one player in particular, they're going to have some stabby skills because they're going to take the role as the Weeping Angels.
Very nice.
And they're not going to make it easy for you either. So they're going to be outwitting and outsmarting each time a player gets out of their gates, stop their opponents from escaping, and let's face it, wish to see the Doctor and the companions in a random time and space throughout history. In all fairness, I don't think there is worst way to go, really. So, merciful death, in my opinion, but Don't Blink is going to be released this April. So, it's proved to cost about $30 in the US. There's no price of how much it's going to be here just yet, but I presume Gale Force 9 are going to let us know real soon, considering it's out in a couple of months. But remember, don't blink. Do not blink.
An 11th Doctor, that's Tennant, isn't it?
Tennant, no, it's Matt Smith.
Oh, it's Matt Smith's 11th Doctor.
Mm-hmm.
So that means that my favorite Doctor wasn't the 10th Doctor either. That was Tennant. Was he Tennant?
Tennant was 10.
Right.
And
Eccleston
was the one before that. Yeah.
He's 9.
Yeah.
So Doctor 9 is my favorite Doctor. Believe it or not. I must be in the minority there. Obviously, I have a soft spot for Tom Baker, having grown up with Tom Baker. But let's face it, it was naff. In a nice way, but it was naff. Eccleston was my favorite of all the Doctors. I quite like the dude that did that 13th Doctor that was kind of like badass, but still liked Eccleston. There.
Tennant's my favourite. I do like Tennant. Yeah.
Everybody would well, most would agree. I would have thought. I just thought Eccleston brought a grittiness to it.
Yeah.
And I really liked Billie Piper in it. I thought she was wonderful as Rose.
She was great in it, yeah.
I thought she was wonderful as Rose.
Because she wants to. I'm really liking the sound of doubling. I think the Weeping Angels are very, very cool, and so it's awesome to see them sort of being built into a game. It'll be really interesting to see how it works mechanically in that respect, because I assume you're going to have to try and keep sort of like lines of sight, and it looked like there was some interesting ways that the kind of corridors and rooms were laid out on the board there. So it'd be cool to see how that works, and sort of how the player playing as the Weeping Angels can kind of like make use of where their opponents are and stuff as well.
It reminds me of something we were talking about last week, especially when we were saying about approaching a game that has no death in it. This not necessarily Weeping Angels aren't going to kill you, they're just going to remove you to a different
teleport you into nowhere. Yeah,
although that is a death in due time. It's quite a nice loophole to just end the game with death. Very interesting.
Nice.
These are the ones they only move if people aren't looking. Is that it?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm down with the kids.
Right, what's next?
So next up, we're doing something a little bit sort of old school, but also new in a way. So Risk from Avalon Hill and Hasbro is going to be returning to the tabletop this year with a new spin on it. So a lot of people will remember Risk Legacy. I know it's a favorite of us. We've played it before. We've used it when we've been traveling and all that kind of thing as well. So this is Risk Shadow Forces. Now, Risk Shadow Forces takes a lot of the elements that sort of were built into Risk Legacy in that respect, where you have sort of a board that you will build and change over time. The other things that's really cool about this is that it also includes asymmetrical factions. So each of the different factions in the game will all have their own special powers and abilities and the ways that they interact with each other. And on top of that, you'll be then able to build and change your army as you go through, sort of adding in new elements and stuff and choosing from A or B in order to sort of like level up and that kind of thing. You also then have warlords, who are sort of like pictured on the front cover there as well, which are sort of characters that are the sort of iconic members of your particular faction. And they will take part in not only the larger battles, as you can see here, fighting for control of a global sort of map, very similar to normal Risk, but also as part of a side game that also is played alongside this, where you actually play a more skirmishy squad-based affair with your models on separate boards. So you can have little fights going on between your warlords using their special abilities, fighting for control of resources and that kind of thing, alongside playing out these larger mass battles across the globe at the same time and changing the fate and the themes of the sort of story as it goes. In addition to that, they've taken some cues from sort of Pandemic Legacy and that kind of thing as well, in that as things go, you will start to effectively build your own version of Risk, a little bit like Risk Legacy as well and that kind of thing. And you'll be like unlocking sealed envelopes, finding new things that will appear and sort of like affect the game of Risk, changing up the rules and that kind of stuff as well. The heart of it is still the basic game of Risk that you will know, but they've sort of thrown up a whole bunch of extra stuff in here, I think, which is, kind of makes this very intriguing. Like, I actually quite like Risk Legacy. I thought it was a good spin on things. And I think, weirdly enough, of many of the different variations on Risk, I actually thought Warhammer 40,000 Risk was actually pretty good as well. They did some interesting things there. But this should be sort of like taking things in a different direction, borrowing from a lot of different games as well at the same time, to potentially create a sort of new take on the game for this year. It was very interesting. So,
Risk Legacy, I thought was fab. I thought that was a great innovation. This is
why, Warren? This brings me excitement, a change in Risk, something different.
I'm looking at it and I think this looks like garbage to me.
Really cool.
How do I put this? Okay, last night I made a paella.
Right.
Okay. And I went around my kitchen and I gathered up every bit of crap that I could find in the kitchen. I chucked it all into that paella. And I thought it looked great. But my kids won't eat it. This, to me, looks like they are desperately trying to find something new in Risk, but they lose the balance of what is actually a very, very good game. Risk in itself, look, Risk has its place in the world, okay? And there's no point in pretending Risk is something that it's not. But what Risk does is it does very, very well, okay? And this, looking at this is a mess.
I think you're being very harsh. Yeah.
miniatures at different scales.
Yeah.
Right? It's not skirmishy enough. Oh, let's add skirmish to Risk. Well, how do we do that? Oh, we can't do it on the board. Let's add more boards. So they're skirmishes and stuff to the side.
And they're played as separate games and then you move over to play the larger sort of global stuff at the same time. So you've got lots of different ways to approach it and tell that story. I think
it feels shoehorned to me. I don't know. Look, everybody's fun is different. I know that. But on this occasion, I'm looking at this, and the whole thing just feels like a giant misfire to me.
Potentially. Well, I guess we'll see.
I hope I'm wrong.
I guess we'll see.
I'm hoping I'm wrong. And, when I get a chance to play it, I really hope I'm wrong, so I'm not feeling like I'm wasting my time. But when I'm looking at it, and I'm going, it's not, there's nothing, it's all over the place from what I can see.
It'll come down to the interaction between this and the main map. Because Risk is not a quick game that you play through and fire out. So if every time you're not doing something on this map because you're doing something over here on these ones, is that going to double the length of gameplay, triple it? The interaction between this needs to be fairly seamless.
And the fact that even the sense of scale from a geopolitical basis, Jerry, Risk is a global battle, right? Let me give you an analogy. This is like having World War II. With all your armaments and stuff like that, they're all around the place and saying, aha, but we also got Hitler, Stalin, and Churchill in their room to knock out of each other as well.
Makes sense.
I don't think anybody should put them in a row. No.
What could possibly happen in a skirmish that is realistically going to affect a geopolitical game like Risk?
I'm making assumptions here, but I would assume that there's going to be sort of certain elements of those objectives and sort of intel and things that you'll pick up that will then unlock certain things that you can use in the main game and all that kind of thing. I am, well, I sound excited for this. I'm cautiously excited because it's still this. But
you were excited for this.
but now you're saying all these things. But anyway, but I'm very eager to give it a go because I like the idea that they're sort of building on this basis and then borrowing from the games that effectively moved things on when it came to sort of legacy mechanics and that kind of thing. I'll be interested to see what they do because obviously Risk Legacy is great. I'll just be interested to see what they do. I'm
a huge fan of Risk. I think Risk is a great game. At its core, it does what it does. And I've had some great games of Risk, where it's been back and forth and you always try to take Australia, but it's like, but I have had some great games of Risk, but this for me, I don't know. Look, I hope I'm wrong. I'm definitely willing to give it a chance. Maybe they have unlocked a mechanic that completely rejuvenates the whole thing, the way Legacy did. So maybe they've cracked it. But on the surface, from a very shallow perspective, this is the first time I've seen it. What I'm looking at, I'm going.
It's because they've stuck the world map there. If this was Risk Warriors, come out and play. And it wasn't the map of the world, it was New York split into different sections, and you're trying
if it was more localized, Jerry, you're
trying to control areas of New York. Your gang wants to be the biggest, and then there's little skirmishes would mean something because you're not dealing with massive overarching thing. You're getting, a group of people in a room to tag a tube station or stab up somebody else or set.
Heck, it could even work as what was the battle at the end of Rogue One? The Battle of
Scarif, yeah.
Yeah, the Battle of Scarif. There's a prime example there where you have small skirmishers trying to achieve objectives that will have a genuine impact on it. But it's a self-contained battle. Do you know what I mean?
I understand.
It just feels. I'm with you, Jerry. I think you're right. I think if it connected tighter, but hey, I could be completely wrong. And that's the beauty of board games. You get to be surprised sometimes. So
I'm often surprised. I found a copy of Risk in the roof loft. last week, and I didn't even realise I'd bought a copy of Risk.
I don't think you even know half the stuff that's up there, Jerry.
They're all presents from drunk past me.
Who's next?
Me, I'm quite keen on horror tabletop games. So the reason why I'm quite keen on horror tabletop games is because I've got control of what happens when it comes to horror movies. I just tend to sit there like that and watch the whole thing with my eyes shut. But I've been keeping on a horror board game that should be heading over to retail over here in the UK really soon. So players are put into the pitch black darkness in the form of lost souls in hope to escape doom before the fearsome wax eaters get them and the flicker of their candle goes out. So whether you want to go alone or 4 other players, everybody's going to be faced with a tile-laying labyrinth, okay, in hopes to find some keys to get out. It's a really dark maze, and players are going to need to utilise their candlelight to go forward. But hidden in the darkness are some really petrifying wax eaters. They don't want you to leave. They don't want you to get out. But luckily for you, they don't like the light too much. So they must have had some bad experiences with sunburn or something like that. But they don't like it. So keeping still under the candlelight is probably your best bet, but you do want to get out. So you're going to guide yourself through a maze with aid of the flickering candle with a little bit of vision ahead. But the candle's got a limited amount of time, meaning you could get stuck. And by the way, you don't just need one key. Every player that's in the game has to track down all of their own keys for the whole group to escape. So that is quite terrifying. So depending on how many of you are looking to escape, it can take roughly about an hour to play. But as I said, the winning goal is to find all of the keys, not just one.
Have we a wider shot of the game, Jerry?
If you click on the link at the bottom of the news article, there's a full image of the game there. So you're going to want to you are going to want to draw up your tactics this one. But the pre-order is online on the FLGS. You can find it online at the moment. It is out. It was supposed to come out at the end of last year, but it's out on the US at the minute. So I am hoping we see it. It's all up on pre-orders on the UK websites at the moment and loads of FLGS.
And were those little metal minis replacements for the coloured meeples?
They're your wax eaters. They're your demons.
They're the evil creatures.
So they're the evil creatures, and then you're the meeples.
Yeah.
Right.
It reminds me very much of a very good game that came out, I think it was 2017, called Subterra, which was all about laying tiles, and you had to sort of work your way out through the through like a cavern, effectively. But I really like this creepy nature of things where you've got that kind of the candlelight, and I like that thing of as you move, obviously that changes the way the tiles are laid out. So as you move away from things, you've only got this little tiny area that you can actually see in. So the path disappears behind you and all that kind of thing. It's very creepy, very eerie. And Smirk and Dagger do some really fun little things. So this one seems like a very good one to check out, I think.
Sure.
Yeah. Nice. There you go. What's next?
Next up, we're going to dive into a little bit of modern warfare. In fact, maybe a little bit too close to home, I guess. But White Dragon Miniatures, you may remember them of doing like some really awesome sci-fi stuff back in the day. Yes. They did these really cool like starfighters and all that kind of thing. I still love those ships with all my heart. But they have sort of moved in the direction now of doing modern warfare troopers, and their latest set of releases are for a couple of Russian patrols that you can use on modern warfare games.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So all of these miniatures are incredibly nice resin sculpts. They are all incredibly high detail, as you can see here. They come with a couple of different options for them. So whenever you go to buy these, you can buy them in 28mm or you can buy them in 20mm, which I'm sure will make a lot of people very happy. And then you can choose the different heads as well. So you can either have them with the goggles up on the top of their helmets, goggles over their eyes, or just with the complete bare heads and all that kind of thing as well, which is pretty awesome. The first of the squads comes with a commander, a medic, a rifleman, and a machine gunner. And then the second squad comes with a rifleman, a grenade launcher user, an RPG, and then one of his crewmates who's also carrying an RPG at the same time as well. This is going to be the start of a much larger collection for the Russians, a little bit like what they've done with some of their previous stuff as well for the Brits. the insurgents, the Taliban, and also the Israeli Defense Force as well. But they're kind of really building on this range, giving us effectively all the kind of core troops that you would get for a lot of these different forces. It's a little bit different from kind of what Spectre do, where Spectre kind of make the specialists that do all the special operations stuff. White Dragon have sort of turned their attention to effectively making the as I say, the rank and file of these armies that go out and fight in these different locations across the world. So you can use these in sort of conflicts in Eastern Europe, in the
center
Middle East.
mass.
So there's really fun stuff that they've been working on. There's also a link to their website if you just want to quickly gaze over that, Jerry.
I saw a post on Facebook actually from White Dragon Miniatures, asking for suggestions of people to review these minis. Pick me!
Weirdly enough, Warren, they already have picked us.
Yeah. Pick me! I want to try them. Jerry, the main question here is, right, and since Ben mentioned it, it's all I can think about.
Yes.
Would you go 28 mil or would you go 20 mil on these?
Probably 28.
You'd go 28, yeah?
Yeah. Mostly because I could use them with Delta 10
Very
behind
true.
me.
Yeah.
Because I've already got some modern minis in there on specialists and stuff. So having some more sort of generic rank and file, I suppose, to chuck in there would be interesting.
Yeah.
But there's a lot to be said for 20, mind you. Being able to actually go bigger, I suppose.
I tell you what. If they've picked you guys, they can do 28 mil. But pick me, and I will do 20 mil. I want to experiment with 20 mil.
I'm sure if we let White Dragon know, they give us some of each, I think. So yeah.
Okay. But please pick me. I want to do 20 mil. I took my Modern Warfare to 15 mil.
You did, yeah.
And loved it because it just gave more scale. Here's the thing about Modern Warfare free, right?
Right.
Basically, whenever you get to moderns, weapons don't really have ranges anymore, right?
True. Yeah.
So so it really is an effect of you can, when you start to come down the scale down to 15 mil, you really get the feel of your kind of like combined. What's it called? Combined action or combined
arms.
Combined arms, where multiple teams are progressing to try and complete a mission, because a mission can't be completed just by one team on its own. Yeah. So you would have multiple delta, and the other great thing when you start to go to like 15 mil and whatever is you can even start to think in terms of insertion, of the helicopters coming in, and then coming out of the helicopters. That's difficult to do at 28 mil. Okay, but that to me that's the picture in my head. That's what I see when I think Modern Warfare. I'm thinking guys fast rappelling down from choppers onto the building tops and Humvees, a convoy of Humvees moving up, and then the guys getting out, and then maybe a middle Humvee gets blown up, and then the guys behind it are all. So this is what I think. So, but the thing about 15 mil is. It is 15 mil. You lack a little bit of the wow factor of the poser scale that you would get with 28 mil. So I'm wondering, would 20 mil give me the best of both worlds? Could I be both a poser and a brilliant poser at 20 mil?
That is fair.
I don't often flex on this show, but pick me!
We'll email White Dragon again.
On the condition, though, that somebody paints them for me. That's too shaky.
One for John,
yeah,
lovely looking stuff. Definitely interested. We'll have to cycle back round to White Dragon. Maybe as an Indie of the Week, Jerry.
Done them already.
I've already done them. Yeah.
I've missed so much.
At some point, we're going to have to revisit some because we have done quite a lot at this point. But so maybe your wish will be granted. I
am looking forward to seeing it and looking forward to really digging into them and see, because the sculpts are beautiful. I love the sculpts because they're clean. They're clean cut. They're not too busy. And yeah, I really like that. What's next?
So we finish off with some Games Workshop news, talking about the pre-orders coming up for this weekend. So if you missed out on Octarius and that larger box set, there are still some of them floating around, including on our web store. There are also going to be some new options in starter set form for people diving into Kill Team. There's going to be the new starter set, which is cut down. Effectively, it kind of just removes the harder board and the larger pieces of terrain. You still get pretty much everything else that you would have got in the initial set for Octarius, just without the big, huge modular pieces in this one. You're also going to be able to buy each of the kill teams individually as well for the first time. So if you missed out on the Death Corps of the Krieg, the Veteran Guardsmen, you can now pick up those separately. Lloyd is already booking in 2 of these. There is also the set of Orc Commandos as well. So if you didn't get those, then you can now pick up those separately. All very characterful, all looking very cool. There's even an SAS Goblin in there as well, which is amazing. So
there he is.
It could be SBS.
It could be true, yeah. And then he could
ready to raid the Goblinian embassy.
Yeah.
So,
But so yeah, if you missed out on the Kill Team stuff, there are going to be new models, that new starter set. There's also going to be a new book released as well, in addition to this terrain set. So I'll get to the book in a second. So the terrain set here basically gives you everything that was available in the Octarius set, but without any of the miniatures. So if you wanted to just pick up the terrain just to use 40k or something, then this is probably the box to go and look at. When it comes to terrain from Games Workshop, they're usually actually pretty reasonably priced when it comes to their boxes. Their miniatures for their units and stuff are obviously fairly expensive, but a lot of their terrain kits are actually pretty good value for money. So if you're interested to get yourself basically all the terrain you'd need for a reasonable sized board for 40k, starting around to like the combat patrol level, this is pretty good for that. There is also going to be a book that's coming out which collects together the rules for the Veteran Guardsmen and the Orc Commandos, as well as a few other bits and pieces in there as well. So there's going to be like a full campaign to run through in there if you want to go in and play that out. So it's just another option for those people that maybe have dived into Kill Team and picked up alternative bits and pieces rather than the Guardsmen and the Orc Commandos. But yeah, if you're interested in Kill Team, all that's going to be available to pre-order tomorrow. So you better go check that out on store.ontabletop. Whew. We also got to look at some new fancy stuff in the future, mainly for Ben's bank account. And this is the addition of some more Aeldari for the craft world in 140,000. We are finally getting, thank God, new plastic Dark Reapers. And I got to say, as much as people have moaned about these miniatures online, I think they look awesome. I think they have managed to bring together the old school look of the Dark Reapers from first edition and then added on some of that and sort of new flair and look that we got from sort of like later kits at the same time. Everyone has been talking about their weird skull faces and saying that they're just going to get rid of that and just cover them as like blank sort of like Spirit Seer almost style faces. I'm like, keep the goofy, weird skull face. It looks really fun and awesome and different. I think
are these Dark Eldar?
No.
So that is that particular model has been done to match the Ynnari, who are a different faction within the Eldar.
Of course they are.
Which have, so you've got the Eldar, which are the Aeldari, and you've got the Drukhari, who are the Dark Eldar. Sure. The Ynnari are the ones in the middle who are trying to resurrect their own sort of like past died god, effectively, that's kind of got some Slaneshi things going on in there.
So they're kind of like the lukewarm water between the fire and the ice.
Basically, yeah.
Neutral-ish.
They're the ones that haven't chosen a side because they're on the fence. Yeah, they're those kind of people. If I was diving into this set, I would, and this is probably going to be something that's going to be all over bit sites in the near future. I want all of them to wear those hoods. I think those hoods with the masks, I think looks really cool. And an entire red squad of those done as Dark Reapers, I think would look amazing. But, you know, horses for courses.
One step away from cat ears there.
Yeah,
exactly. John's going to love these. Yeah, I've been reliably informed that apparently they're range finders. I don't know why they're not built into the helmets, but
they are built into their helmets. They're just
on the side.
Just going through the hood. It's got a really kind of like a cheap Green Goblin kind of look going to it, which is
Think of it like the rangefinders that they used to use for artillery in World War II. So they would periscope out left and right so that you could triangulate, you could range it. Think of it that way.
Yeah, that's why some creatures have bigger ears so that they can triangulate.
Yeah. I'm also going to say as well, like when you look at those particular miniatures there in that shot, They look exactly like the old sketches from sort of like first and second edition of like Eldar and how they came to be. So, people were going to moan if they were different. People were going to moan if they stayed the same. Everyone's got their own opinions on these. I like them. I'm going to add them to my army. There we go. Done, dusted, sorted. I don't care what you think. There we go.
I kind of like the scarecrow look that they've got going on. So, yeah.
You could cut the weather vanes off.
You could do.
The last edition, the last version of them had them, but the previous one didn't. They only had them on the Exarch.
Yeah. Yes, the Exarch had them, and the
rest didn't. They were just pure skull helmets. The heads aren't the most offensive thing for me. It's these loincloths seem very blocky, chunky, and very thick, including all the ridges down them. The one you could see from the side on was particularly egregious. I mean, that just looks very static.
It's a chunk of tire.
Yeah.
A chunk of tank track.
Most of the cosplayers out there that need to recreate that, clearly. It
must have been in the video. Yeah. Because that I thought was worse.
I do get what you're saying now.
When this comes side on, look how thick this is between the legs.
It's quite thick.
And
it's
perfect.
I must say, I do prefer the original sort of loincloth design that they had on the older models. I think that does look better. But
I mean, it's just that just looks like a slab. It's like somebody.
I think I've just found my next recording for my soundboard.
Because if it wasn't for that, the rest of the model isn't bad. The rest of the model is an Eldar with a big gun, which is what you want in life. Yep. But it's
absolutely
that's all I need. That's all I need. So, yeah.
I think you could do a really nice, the one with the cat ears. You could do a really nice, the skull at the front could look really good, darkened out with neon at the front.
I am waiting for someone to do them in sort of bubblegum blue, pink and white and do them as Hello Kitty Eldar.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, of course.
Imagine that's right on its way. Yeah.
But yeah.
Right. I think it's time to explore what we're going to be doing on our printers.
So 3D printing, I'm excited to see what we have, peeps.
Yeah. Well, this is an unusual one. I was sent it by a friend who was getting very in-depth in axolotls and the likes. And they went, oh, you should see this. And I went, oh, that's amazing. So I threw the link in there, and then Free went, oh, yeah, I'm on the Patreon already.
Mm-hmm.
So it's CobraMode, the best kind of mode.
You do like the thigh slapping and...
I imagine that's exactly what would happen. I would. Free can. But they are primarily, I would say exclusively, actually fantasy based.
Oh, okay.
So they do have a Patreon. Free may be able to tell us more about this. Wonderful world of their Patreon.
Yes, they have got their own Patreon. They do. There is a lot of character miniatures. So you've got stuff from, as you can see there, you have little tiny axolotl people. You have a hippopotamus platypus. You have got all things you didn't know you needed. Mushroom warriors, as well as that, is one thing that I really love about CobraMode is their bases. Their bases are really interesting. I ended up backing CobraMode on Patreon for their bases and their terrain alone, because it's just very much this aesthetic you see is very much embedded into there.
I really like root people. It's kind of very awesome.
Yeah, it's a very different take on druids and dryads and the like. And this is the thing when I started flicking through it. So it's a husband and wife team.
Okay.
So the husband does the sculpting.
Mr. Cobra and Mrs. Mode.
So I believe his name's Aaron. He does the sculpting, and then his wife is, I want to say, Andrea. She would do like the business side, but also some of the concepting and bits and pieces.
Yeah.
But every month is a collection around a specific thing, but you get a set of miniatures, a set of bases, what they call plop terrain, a big piece of scatter that is themed in with it, and also the stats for 5e. Unusual. It's not the first time we've seen a snail.
That is adorable.
Vendor.
Oh, it's beautiful. They've got It's stunning.
Did you see?
It's been a slow day at work today.
Did you see they did a Christmas version of that? They had a Christmas tree on its back.
Oh, that's
instead
awesome!
of all the other
I
stuff.
like that.
I'd say
Yeah.
that.
But the YouTube
A
channel, I
moth
think, shows
warrior.
it off. Yeah,
Oh,
it's part moth, part fawn.
Looks
and,
like it.
Yeah.
and it might be because I've
You
spent. This is what got the link sent to
Oh,
me
these
originally.
guys.
Yeah.
These
Yeah, they're
guys
great.
are a winner.
Yeah, the axolotl. There's loads of different axolotls there doing many a different thing. They're so adorable.
With
they really are.
the Japanese feel to it, including a big
Oh.
oni sort of
Mm.
style. And they have this it's a mixture of whimsical and frightening. It
Mhm.
might be because I've been going back, reaching into the past for Dark Crystal like recently, and a lot of Brian Froud's Goblin illustrations and the weird stuff that they did for Labyrinth between Henson and Froud, that when you see some of the more outlandish, I suppose, creatures, more than the actual
Yeah.
the small axolotl, the cutesy things, but when you're looking at some of these weird and wacky creatures and you're going, that could have come straight out of the mind of Froud. The little tiny fish people
Yeah.
are particularly gorgeous. There's one that's got like an oyster clam helmet or on, where it's like top
Yeah.
and bottom. But that,
Domos Samore, very
yeah,
good.
at no point will I pronounce any of the names because they're all made up and baffling to me as to how they're
Yeah.
pronounced.
The kind of strange druidic creatures that we saw, they're like little murlocs on like acid. I love those things.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're kind of like twisted druidic creatures
Yes.
that we saw.
Yep.
They really reminded me of the style of monster creatures in. Do you remember Annihilation, the Natalie Portman film,
No.
where she like steps through like this?
Even
void.
Natalie Portland doesn't remember that.
I quite liked it. I don't know. But they did this really weird thing where they had like twisted alien versions of what we would associate as normal creatures.
Mhm.
So even though these are kind of fantasy focused, you could do some really fascinating things with them, with some of these with like bioluminescence and all that kind of thing. That would be really cool. I love the idea of plop terrain. That's
Plop
great.
terrain.
Plop
You just plop it on
terrain.
your tabletop. Plop, done.
Yeah. Plop it down, mate. Yeah.
which is one way of doing it. It is a very new patron as well. They only started March last year.
There's
Oh,
there's
wow.
not.
So the range isn't super massive, but you can see
They've got loads
sort of
on My Mini
things
Factory.
developing. Yeah.
There is a ton on My Mini Factory, from bases to terrain to loads of different miniatures. With, as you said, if you back the Patreon as well, you get 50% off of the My Mini Factory too.
Oh, nice.
So the bases that are $1.99, you can pick up bases, a set of different size bases from 25 to 50 for 99p. So
Look, ducks,
It's
if people want to
duck
play
people.
RuneQuest, because RuneQuest got a bit of a resurgence recently.
And it has
with
duck
Glorantha.
people, yeah,
it has
yeah.
duck people in it who are,
Yeah.
I would just say, vicious. And obviously that Oriental theme, the crane coming in there as well,
mhm.
because everybody loves
Literal frame style.
Yeah, very, very literal.
They've got a mix of different things in the fantasy universe as well. So you've got the Oriental one that
Oh.
you're seeing, and you've got a couple of different woodland ones. You've got, what else you say? You've got woodland, Oriental, swamp. Swamp's a big one there as well. You've got underwater theme. There's loads of different stuff to match.
Man, these are awesome.
Yeah,
They're
I love
fantastic.
these. Yeah.
it's just so
It's got sort of like,
bafflingly weird.
yeah, it's got almost like a Final Fantasy feel
Yeah,
to it
I agree
in a
with
little
you.
way, which is kind of cool. Yeah.
I've heard of that.
It's
That's well done, me. I need to go to
a
the
thing
plop
that
train for
exists in
this.
pop culture. Yeah.
But it just
I've
reminds me
got
of.
some plot. That's some plot terrain. There you go. There's your plot
Oh,
terrain.
hang on.
That's the size of your plot terrain. Oh, it's probably light, but yeah,
It's good to know that plop
And they're
train
hollow.
exists.
they support. They supply a lot of this stuff unsupported and hollow, so you can get them.
Is that one you 3D printed yourself?
Yeah, and you can have either or. So you can. They every month they supply your supported and your pre-supported, so you get a chance to choose. This month the supported come a little bit late, but it's up to you what you want to build. And the supports are gorgeous. They just fall off. You don't have to hack them off. Really nice supports.
All about hacking them off.
Mm-hmm.
But I suppose I'll show off my mini factory as well then.
Yeah.
So this is the sort of stuff that you were more keen on then, young Benjamino, the weird and wacky
Yeah.
monsters. I mean, it's a very different take on a dryad / druid and a tree man, but they are still very noticeably
Yes.
tree people.
It kind of reminds me a little bit of the Durgin's Paint Forge range.
Yeah.
Where they do stuff that is kind of like it's sort of got that fey quality to it, but also a little bit quirky, a little bit weird.
Yeah.
I think these would be a stunning little collaboration between the two of those. I love that effectively rider, that commander. That's amazing. I think that'd be really good to work on, and work on some really nice transitions between like maybe her sort of green flesh and sort of like the bark around her as well. I think that'd be really cool.
Yeah.
Oh, very nice.
So you thought, whenever I've seen those, the shrooms that you get on trees.
Oh, yeah.
That's what I was thinking
yeah.
of. But it could be either or. I suppose it's entirely up to you.
Oh, you could do that as like those ridge mushrooms.
Oh,
that would be with little patternings on them. That would be nice.
That's a good idea.
Or you could get Hellboy to just blow them all away.
That would also work.
Yeah.
See, this is both gorgeous and petrifying at the same time. That one, you just click.
Yeah.
Gorgeous and petrifying. That's what's on my Tinder profile.
Oh, look at them.
It's such a, I want to say bizarre, but bizarre in a good way.
Yeah.
It's not the norm. I mean, we
It's
see
a
any
bit Ghibli
number
as well, actually, isn't it? Like,
yeah.
Studio Ghibli.
Yeah, you see any number of elves on a regular basis or dwarves, and even when they're innovative, they still look standard. You expect to see them. This is a whole other world of madness.
How many minds is this coming from?
2.
Just 2?
Husband and wife. Yep.
That's a serious amount of creativity.
Yeah, it really is.
Annoying, isn't it?
Absolutely.
That's very annoying.
It's just.
I mean, this. I have no idea what it is. It has that sort of.
It's a cloud with a
dragon feel.
frog riding around it.
Yeah, having that as a greater water elemental in a game. I mean, people will know what's coming for them. They might not like it, but they'll know it. And look, once again, another one of those. So
Oh, it's the wee
Axolotl or full Mudkip game, whatever you want.
Very nice.
Beautiful.
One of the most endearing things for me, and I've talked about this a long time ago when we started looking at 3D printing, was there are a lot of these people who do merchant levels on their Patreons, and they also do it for CobraMode. They have a merchant level, and so you can, go in and chuck them extra money, and then you can print it and supply it. And I'm going, that's great, because I don't do 3D printing. Who are they? Where do they come from?
Yeah.
You don't know.
Excuse me.
God bless them. But they have on their website a list of who their vendors are and where they are in the world.
That's exactly what you asked for, Jerry.
It is literally what I asked for. And I'm glad to see that somebody was listening, even if, this is just a happy circumstance. But the fact that they've split it down by region as well.
Mm-hmm.
So you can go, well, I'm not in Canada or the Americas, but I can have a look at Mayo Miniatures. Too spicy for the Danes. Mayonnaise. Dark Sphere. I mean, already know Dark Sphere and the quality that that they print in. So being able to look down it and go, well, I can lay my hands on this from Spain or France or the UK or whatever it happens to be, without having to worry then about shipping costs or the amount of time it's going to take to get it. More people should be doing this.
Yeah, I agree. Quite a lot of those links are as well are links to people's Etsy stores. So if you don't want to go on and buy from an individual store, you can head on to one of their Etsy stores and play by PayPal and go ahead with that route.
Your money is secure with PayPal.
Derby, however you pronounce it. Crazy
Derby.
anyway.
Derby.
But yeah, a fantastic little collection, like I say, not even a year old yet.
Wow.
So still room for aggressive expansion, shall we say.
Sure.
And it'll be interesting to see
what they do next,
how they develop, what comes next, and can they maintain? Because when it is just 2 people, you often worry that they'll hit a wall at some point where they're sitting going, well, we've got X, Y, and Z. What do we do next? I'm not sure. And then this sort of can slow them down. But
Although
so far they seem to be knocking it out of the park.
with it being two people, it's very lean to make decisions about what to do next.
That is true.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Gorgeous.
So that is CobraMode.
Mm-hmm.
You'll find
Good idea. Oh.
You'll find them on Patreon, on My Mini Factory, or on CobraMode.com, where you can go and peruse their collections, their blog, their vendors, and so on and so forth. So you can see sort of what they're coming up with and ideas they have as well.
Awesome
So,
stuff.
a lot of stuff going on there. And if you're into your more, I wouldn't even say whimsical, if you're into your more fantastical fantasy, it's definitely one to take a look at, be it 3D printers or for Luddites like myself who just want to make other people print the stuff and then buy it. It's very much a viable thing.
Yeah.
Did you win one of our prizes? Find out on our prize claim center over at OnTableTop.com. Here we list all our previous prizes and those who have won. If you see your username, fill out the form to claim your prize. All prizes must be claimed within 30 days.
Shall we take a look at some Kickstarters to round out the show then, Ben?
We shall, yes. So this is the one that I was denied last week because we had to talk about other things. But this is Matagot, who people will know are the publishers of amazing games like Kemet and Inish. Kemet and the designers behind that game, which is sort of an awesome kind of... We were talking about Risk earlier. Kemet is basically the antidote to Risk. If you don't like the mechanics of that, play Kemet. It's amazing. Dudes on the map, area control, very, very cool. Lots of dice chucking, but also they've worked in some really cool mechanics and upgrades and that kind of thing. Well, they've taken the step to do something extra and awesome with Yucatan, which sort of takes you from the deserts of the Middle East and sort of Egypt and that kind of thing, and instead winds your way into the jungles of the Mayan empires from back in the day in Central America. And so you'll be taking control of Mayan tribes who are fighting to basically grow their empires and satisfy the gods. How do you do that? Well, you'll be taking to the tabletop and you'll be using your Mayan warriors in order to control different regions of the board and ultimately battle each other to the death. However, the death doesn't come at the end of one of those badass axes. Instead, it comes with those amazing obsidian flints in them. Oh, amazing. But anyway, it comes at the hands of sacrifice on the temples to the gods. So what you do is when you fight, you dive into combat, you defeat your enemies, and then you drag them back to your temples, and then you will sacrifice them on the steps of it to your different gods and gain different abilities by doing so, which will allow you to do things like upgrade your warriors, include those massive, awesome monsters in your armies, and all sorts of other things at the same time. The person who has managed to appease the gods the best will be the person who wins the game at the end of it. There is a catch, though. The gods will always want more and more sacrifices as the game goes on. So if you sacrifice, say, for example, 20 people on turn one, and then you can only sacrifice 10 the turn after, the gods will look down on you with great ire, and they will smite you for not fulfilling your contract, basically. And so if you have to make sure that you balance the amount of people that you slaughter in the coolest fashion in order to get the most out of the gods as you play through the game. The other really awesome thing about this is they kind of like condense the play space to this as well. So it's all about this in this sort of like large round ball, which is pretty cool. There's loads and loads of really awesome stuff in there to do with like the upgrades to the way your armies fight. So every time you approach the game, you might attempt it from a different angle. You might try different upgrades. You might try different cards. You might try monsters this time. You might try just doing it with all troops instead. The other thing is the game doesn't use dice for any of the combat. The dice that are in there to kind of like tick things up and that kind of thing, and you use them for upgrades and all sorts of different things, a little bit like Kemet. But in this, all of the combat is done through cards. So you have to work out how many warriors you're going to be sending in and then secretly revealing combat cards in order to outwit your enemies. So you have to play through like this really interesting mind game as you dive deeper and deeper into Yucatan, which I think sounds absolutely
That's cool.
If you have played Kemet or you've played Ines and those kind of games before, I think people are very, very much going to like this. Matagot have got a very good track record with bringing these games to retail after Kickstarters as well. So if you really want to dive in and have fun with this, then you can definitely do that. And I love that they actually have upgraded tokens.
Yeah.
just get out some sweet corn and use the tin. But yeah, some really, really cool stuff in here. I really like what they're doing with this. It's nice to see them approaching again something a little bit different from kind of like your standard medieval fantasy fighting on the tabletop. Obviously they did sort of ancient Egypt. Now they're looking at sort of Mayan mythology and folklore as well. I think it's very, very cool. Some nice twists in this, and I definitely think this is a board game you want to check out if you like a bit of blood on the tabletop. Oh, lovely.
Brutal.
Yeah, it looks very interesting indeed. I take it doesn't share the same mechanics that Kemet does. Then this is a new system that they've built for this.
So I think the key DNA is there from the original, from Kemet, in sort of like the way that you'll fight using the cards and the numbers on those in order to generate who wins and victory and that kind of thing. The way that it changes then is sort of in how things are upgraded, and that kind of sacrifice mechanic towards the gods and stuff like that. So they have thrown in some little tweaks here and there that kind of build on what Kemet was and playing around with that format a little bit more, which is quite cool. But yeah, looks really, really nice. I do notice that they've made it so that from the looks of it anyway, each of the individual players has their own kind of like upgrade trees and things that they work from, rather than there being almost like a shared one that they had in Kemet.
Right.
So they've played around with that a little bit more, which is really cool. But yeah, looks really awesome. And I can't wait to give it a go. I'm hoping it's going to be at conventions this year. That would be lovely. So yeah, nice.
Already making your plans to sacrifice your minions.
Yeah, but just the right amount of sacrifice.
The right amount of sacrifice. If you sacrifice too much too soon, you end up being beloved of the gods, but with nobody left to worship you. That's always a terrible shame. We've all been there. We've all annihilated our own civilizations for the implication of gods in the past. Yeah. I mean, who hasn't?
Sorry, the Shorians. I've destroyed you all.
Well, that's how that one goes. 11 days left on the Yucatan. So if you fancy getting into your Mesoamerica fantasy area control, give that one a look. Rounding out our Kickstarters for the week then, Free.
Okay, well, you all know better than I do that goblins are pretty well known for getting up to risky business. Okay, so whether
risky business,
yeah, that's exactly what goblins are up to, right? Whether they're making a wonderful home under a rotted tree, or growing in their fantasy redneck engineering, that's goblins.
Or stealing babies.
This is goblins, risky business they offer, right? We stereotype them as devious little creatures that just breed at an alarming rate. So, the second adorable Kickstarter is up, putting gobbos in front of centre. So, it's a pocket-sized RPG that requires no dice, no DM, just a little mint tin, and the cards inside, and a brain for adventure. So,
I see there's no Charlies this time.
Unfortunately not, yeah. Unfortunately. So players are going to take the role of Adorablins and pick from several little adorable goblins going on an exciting journey. However, they're not going to be on their own. They're going to be side by side with their own little companion before they plunge into their own story. So you've got choices with resourceful assistants like Shroomy, as you've just seen, Shroomy, or you've got the armoured battle buddies called Rolly and Polly. And I honestly don't think I've found a woodlouse that I've loved this much since Tuck and Roll from Bug's Life, so I'm quite excited about this. But an adventure of 2 to 5 players, they need to go for a portal and complete a series of goals and objectives determined by draw a card. So if you didn't want to add some extra spice to the storyline, although the game doesn't require a GM, you can add one in. There is an option too, if you do want a little bit extra imagination for your story. So I think it's great. Wonderful to get the basics down of RPGs for the younger kiddies of RPGing. Posing the questions that you might get asked in more advanced game systems. But it's a great way to equip your 8+ adventurers in a pocket-sized game with imagination whilst using the Apocalypse system. So there's a few stretch goals as well to be unlocked. Upgrades to game components, a couple of new Adorablins to go on your adventures with, and some new whimsical and damn right adorable companions to come with you. So because who doesn't need a best friend called Snail called Speedy? Like I just want to know who doesn't need that. So there's 13 days left on the clock for this campaign. There's already 10 grand above their initial pitch. So there's a few different pledges available. So you can get the digital version if you'd like, the physical, or a complete bundle as well for children's RPG as well. So be sure to check out the Adorablins.
Yeah, I quite like the narrator cards actually, because that's the hardest part when you're getting anybody into RPGs, not even kids, but just anybody. And somebody goes, "Oh, I fancy doing that," and then they sit at a table, and chances are they just sit there with their mouth glued shut while it goes round, and then somebody goes, "What are you going to do?" And they just look at you funny. But having things like the narrator cards where they can, it gives options then that they can, pluck from. So they kind of get an idea of the sort of things they should be doing or could be doing.
Yeah.
The artworks, I suppose the word is adorable.
Yeah, it's adorable, Jerry.
It's
right adorable.
I like the worm with the fez.
It is very, I like it.
Oh, worm with the fez.
The thing that I thought was nice about this is that it runs with that Powered by the Apocalypse system. Now, that can be a little bit of a culture shock, I think, that system, for some people who've maybe stepped away from things like Dungeons and Dragons before. But that kind of idea of the playbook and kind of moves instead of it just being based around the idea of just simple dice chucking. So I think this would be an interesting one to use as kind of like an inroad to that. Because obviously they've themed this so that it can work with younger gamers. So if you can get your head around a little bit sort of like how that works and then move on to other Powered by the Apocalypse games afterwards, I think that'd be really cool. But yeah, I think this is a really nice idea.
Well, as long as you like woodlice.
Yeah.
As long as
I'm not entirely keen on woodlice because I used to have a shower.
Oh yeah.
And in this shower, it was a fake
he doesn't
back.
shower anymore, by the way.
Right. So do you know the way you have tiles in showers, right?
Yeah.
This was like plastic tiles, but on a wooden thing. So it was actually wooden shower, right? And every time you stepped into the shower, you needed to beat this. You needed to beat the entire wall because about 400 woodlice would fall down into the shower tray. And then you'd have to wash them all away, and then you could have your shower. Because if you didn't, you're just going to keep stepping on them as they fall down from behind it. It was horrible.
So you're telling me you committed mass woodlice genocide on a daily basis? Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you at least sacrifice them to the god of showers?
I
probably would have got rid of them.
To the god of the sinkhole.
Oh, well, close enough. So if you're not a fan of woodlice, then maybe use the shroom or the fez-wearing worm in your games.
Or the snail.
Or the snail, Speedy. But the Adorablins, there's 13 days left, and it's a, by Grabthar's Hammer, bargain. It's like 11 quid for the physical
really
copy.
11 quid?
Yeah, it's really cheap.
Yeah, stick it in your pocket. Why not? At that price, why not buy a copy?
And you get the digital copy as well with it. So when you spend £11, you get digital.
People don't like that. I don't like that. Why would you want that?
Don't buy a takeaway this week. Back the Adorablins. There you go.
It's definitely a way to go. That wraps us up for another week's worth of news and gaming.
Yep.
We will return for the XLBS, where our Cult of Games members get to listen to us waffle on about our hobby and theirs. If you've not seen us, come on over to OnTableTop.com, sign up for a 30-day trial, and you can join us and see what we get up to when left unsupervised. Otherwise, we'll be back again next Friday night for more of the same, and we will see you then.
Go ahead and check out our other content on screen now. And while you're at it, why not hit subscribe and remember to ding our dong. Go on, you know you want to click it. Go on.